Welcome back to the Marcus Milione podcast. I brought Sean back, so he is here with us co-hosting again. Today's episode is going to be about perception versus reality of life in your 20s and living in New York City, essentially. Also, what's the third one?
What makes a life worth living and what defines a life well lived?
Yeah, I mean, that obviously we'll touch on it, but we are very young. We're 26, 24 respectively, and I wouldn't say that that's a topic that we can offer a whole lot of insight into. That'd be something, to ask someone much older with much more experience, but we can try to talk about it.
Yeah, it's just kind of our experiences so far, and I think there's some value in that, and maybe not as much as somebody who's in their 70s or 80s, but still valuable.
Okay. So perception versus reality of life in your 20s. The first kind of topic under that general idea is the idea of mindset and approach to being young. I think Sean and I I wouldn't say like a majority mindset. A lot of the stuff that we are doing is kind of like niche activities, the running, the lifting. We don't really go out. I don't know. We're homebodies. But when you look at your life and your future, I think it's more about what you want to experience versus what you need to do to make sure you have a secure future. I think your 20s are kind of a period of time where you are tempted with a lot of stuff, keeping up with friends, keeping up with the people you see on social media, and it can be hard, especially with the hyper kind of curation nature of social media. You see people living what looks like to be crazy life in their 20s, rarely working, doing a bunch of crazy stuff, and it can weigh on your mental when you're maybe stuck at home or just studying, doing your thing at college, and you're wondering why that's not the reality in which you live.
100%. And I think it's important to know that like on social media, there's these glimpses and, even on TikToks we make, it's just a short glimpse into our day. If it's just like a running TikTok or something like that, people always assume like, oh, is all you do is run. And, you're missing this, 95% of the picture. We show you the interesting things. There's a ton of, lame, uninteresting things throughout our day that just you guys wouldn't care about, so you don't show it.
Yeah, I mean, I made a video recently on TikTok, and it was about the foods that I was eating during the day, and I got a ton of comments asking, like, do you work? And, something as simple as what I'm eating sparks people to ask that question because it looks, I guess, labor intensive. So they naturally inquire about work because it's how do you find the time for something like that? And it comes down to just your prioritization schedule. If you are not prioritizing the food that you're eating or you're not prioritizing your training, then yeah, something like watching somebody eat regimented like that, the same stuff every day, kind of makes no sense and seems a bit time intensive. But when you've been doing it for a while and you're eating for mainly performance, you learn to just cut steps. You can bulk prep food. You can buy, for example, frozen vegetables that you just heat up in the pan while you're working. So the idea of like, quote unquote, do you work doesn't make any sense to me because everything can be prioritized down and still get plenty of work done.
Yeah, especially now with so many people working from home, you can do even more. Like you don't have to worry about not being close to your kitchen. You don't have to worry about, having to go to the gym if it's like closer by. So I think even nowadays, like you can really work on it and you can prioritize your time better than you ever could before.
Yeah, I mean, now, obviously I'm running Minted New York and Minted Health, and I'm working for myself. But even before then, when I was working a corporate job, it was prepping my foods and putting them in a container, bringing them for lunch, having the same thing essentially ready for dinner it probably max takes us 10 minutes to produce a lunch or dinner max.
Yeah.
And that's like total time, not time like you just put something on the stove and you can walk away and do something else while it's cooking.
Yeah.
So it's not as hard as people think, but it just comes down to priorities.
Mm-hmm. And so it all comes back to this, perception of what you see online versus what we're actually doing, what people are actually doing. And so I think it's important to not get caught up in why am I not having fun and doing all these crazy things like I'm seeing these TikTok people or social media people do online who are out partying on the weekdays and all this stuff. But just know that their circumstances are totally different than like I think majority of the people.
Yeah, and I'll talk about this more maybe when we get into living in New York City, but you have to understand that there are people on social media who come from extreme levels of wealth. And to compare your lifestyle to that is very dangerous because you are essentially going to try to keep up with somebody who is the child of extreme wealth, and you're trying to compete or keep up with essentially, if their parents made all that money, someone who's already had a full career of earnings. You cannot do that if you are 20-some years old and just starting out in your career. It won't work.
And on the flip side of that, the portrayal of extreme wealth in these activities, it drives views. These are the videos that people are seeing. So then more people want to portray this type of image, even though they might not necessarily have this. So you have to weed through the grass and figure out, and really think and be like, is this legitimate? And do I really need to be like aspiring for this if it's not actually legitimate?
Yeah, I think it was probably worse on Instagram, the hyper curation, the just like lavish whole life thing. It's not as prevalent, at least on my For You page. I'm sure it is on some people's, but I notice it a lot less on social medias like TikTok and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But in your 20s, there's this balancing act of like, you have this idea that you have so much time in front of you, right? You're 20 years old. You're going to live to what the average is, 80-something years old. Like, I have to experience all of these things and have fun and do all of this stuff in my 20s so that I can really hunker down in my 30s and 40s and I presume make money, be secure, have a family if you're going to have a family, that type of thing. And it works for some people, but it doesn't work for everybody.
Yeah, I think nowadays, people are going away from that cookie cutter, you get a job, you stay in that job, you climb the ladder, you then find a partner, you get married, have kids, just the standard that we've always thought of. So I think now people are straying away from it because they realize you can work hard in your 20s and set up a better life for you maybe a little bit down the road, or potentially become very successful younger.
Yeah, I think that is exacerbated by the advances in technology, just the internet in general, giving people alternative routes to the college, degree, corporate ladder, family path that kind of our parents grew up with in the advent of the internet in general. And there is an unhealthy pressure, especially in a city like New York City, for young people to be grinding all the time, depending on your industry, investment banking, that there's so much pressure there in finance and consulting and all of those job types. But at the same time, it's a balance, right? I don't think anybody willingly subjects themselves to that level of work without having some ambition for a more secure future in terms of finances and kind of just like nest egg insulation and wealth.
Yeah.
But the biggest part of your 20s, I think, that can help you is learning to make mistakes and then just learn from them, because nobody has it all figured out. The more that I grow up and the more that I talk to people who are much older than me, who sit in important positions, you realize that there are still large portions of their day where they don't have all the answers. They've just become very good at understanding the issue and finding ways to fix it in the most efficient manner. I think that's important because a lot of times when you're young, middle school, even in high school, you look at these figures and you assume they don't make mistakes, they have all the answers, etc. And
Yeah.
that's not the case.
I think, yeah, especially because when you were younger, you have teachers who you obviously look up to and think they know everything because they're the ones teaching you all of these skills. But as I've gotten older and as Marcus just said, a lot of the times, especially if they're a good boss or, somebody who's higher up in a company, they'll look to you and ask you questions and like they want you to know that they don't have all of the answers. Like it's one of those things where you have to work through it, and that's how jobs work. There's no one person in a company who is going to have the answer to every single question, every single problem, have the solution for all of these problems. It'll never happen. It's a team effort.
I think the sign of a good boss is their willingness to listen to the most junior people on the team. I had one of my first bosses that I worked for an extended period of time under listened to my ideas and actually started to seek my ideas. And it was like not only empowering for me as a junior employee, but I think opened his eyes, and I would be willing to bet he would argue the same, to how fast and how tapped in young people are to technology, and especially in a corporate environment where things are generally extremely slow moving and most of executive management is older and might not be as tapped into how advanced things have gotten and how using those things can ultimately better the workplace or make things more efficient.
Yeah, and just by having this relationship with your boss or a superior, it not only like helps you ask questions, learn about the job, but at the same time, like they're learning from you, and it becomes very cohesive where it's a mutual relationship and not, somebody who has power over you.
Yeah. Also, another big part of your 20s is just general adversity. It probably starts a bit earlier than 20. Like you're in high school, you don't get into the college that you want to get into, then you're in college and you can't get the interviews for the jobs that you want. How are you dealing with this? What are you doing to take steps to get those jobs in the future? But those are all important lessons of like, it's okay to be told no. It's okay to not get everything on the first try, because it teaches you to go back and retool and figure out, okay, well, maybe I didn't study as hard as I needed to and get the grades that I needed to, so this is the result. And would I go back and do it differently? It depends on how strongly you feel about not getting what you wanted.
Yeah, and I think it's your priorities at the time. Like, I always look back to my freshman and sophomore year of high school, where I didn't really understand the implications of having good grades and like the next step in college and all of that stuff. So those 2 years really put me behind because I had no ambition for those types of things. I had no ambition to like see further down the road and see a career and see what I wanted to do. So that right there, I didn't have the best grades my freshman and sophomore year. So my junior and senior year, I had to work 2 times as hard just to recover from that. Whereas if I just applied myself, I would have been in a much better position. But that's all to say I learned from those things and I grew from them. And I don't regret, like I regret not applying myself, but it is what it is. I learned from it, and now I'm better because of it.
I think learning to let things go too is pretty important, because you can't just dwell on it. Like a lot of the past is the past. You can't change that. So just learn and move on. It's the same thing from failure. Like just learn from it and move on. Another big part of your 20s that I don't think enough people talk about are just developing habits to take care of your future self. Good hygiene, brushing your teeth, flossing your teeth. One, dental pain is terrible. There are people that suffer from dental pain that makes them go crazy.
Yeah.
And also, it's extremely expensive if you're not insured or you don't have great dental insurance. Like that, those bills add up. And then if you can't pay for whatever it is that needs to be fixed, you end up with the pain, and now you're living in pain. And just a lot of the stuff can be avoided by taking care of it now.
Yeah. I've always obsessed about, like something about teeth and all of that stuff.
Same.
I've always made sure to floss, and because if you think about it, like this set of teeth, like you can get veneers, you can get all of that stuff, but that
Dentures.
can lead to more complications. Like this is the only, it's very scary to think that this is the only set of teeth I have, and if I mess something up, then like there's nothing I can do about it. It's going to be a fake tooth. So
and those porcelain veneers are not cheap.
Yeah.
The one you knocked out of my mouth, like total out of pocket was like $5,000.
Yeah, and you see a bunch of videos online where people go and get these veneers done by like a cheaper person, and then all of these dentists talk about it, and they're like, this is the worst thing you can do for your teeth. Like it's going to lead to so many issues, and you're going to have to get them redone and just spend more money and spend more money, and it's just a pit at that point.
It's a cost that can be generally avoided by starting young, taking care of your teeth. And I think this goes for general health as well. You don't have to be on the extreme, like training for races or trying to be a bodybuilder. I think general good diet and fitness, whether it be working out or going on long walks, getting some form of activity built into your day-to-day schedule, and understanding foods is a big thing. What is the food doing for you? How much has it been processed? Where is it coming from? Those are all things that just lead to general overall health, and I think also contribute to a better mental health.
Yeah. I think generally just being conscious of the decisions you're making about your health is like a huge step, because as long as you understand the implications, you generally are going to want to try to prevent that. If you have no idea, then it's just ignorance at that point, and you have no, like, of course you're not going to do anything about it if you don't know, what can happen.
Yeah. Also, your personal finances, like getting a grip on and understanding debt, savings, paying bills on time, how to properly use a credit card, not carrying a balance, building credit so that down the road when you want to buy a house or get approved for a loan to start a business, your credit's not shot. Like understanding those ideas, and generally on the topic of money, either if your parents aren't teaching it to you, the school's not teaching it to you, so you're going to have to find out and figure it out on your own. Google, YouTube. I mean, YouTube's a great place to learn just about anything. There's lots of creators talking about personal finances, how best to use your money, how best to budget. I mean, setting a budget is where you can end up having a lot of savings. That's all just part of just developing healthy habits while you're young. And then it goes into you're like 25, getting to the latter half of your 20s, 30s creeping up, and a lot of people are trying to figure out what it is that makes them happy, finding ways to enjoy and do things that you enjoy more often. Something that I notice a lot in people my age, me being 26, is tons of career changes. People thinking they wanted to go into a career field maybe because it made a lot of money or they didn't really have any idea. Maybe it's the career field their parents were in, and then you're in something and you realize it just doesn't bring you the joy that you want. And so if you're in that position and you can't make a career change, developing hobbies outside of work that you do enjoy, find things that you're passionate about, try a bunch of different stuff, and ultimately you can work to make it your full-time job, you can work to make it a side hustle, or you can just keep it as a hobby. But I think going into your 30s, 40s, and then, closer to dad and mom's age, like late 50s, 60s, not having a hobby can be dangerous.
Yeah. And I think a lot of the times, if you're in a job where you can't move and you're miserable and you don't like it, and you start picking up a hobby, as long as you have free time and can actually go do this hobby and get more ingrained into the community of the hobby and all of that stuff, I think a lot of the times it can actually turn into something that you can maybe pursue like on the side, as Mark has said. And then, I mean, if you love it that much, maybe even make it a job. And I think that would be more fulfilling than staying. And even if you were making more money at the other place, more fulfilling just generally.
Yeah. I mean, I'm kind of in that boat right now. For me, fashion and fitness are obviously two of my biggest hobbies, and it's turned into my full-time job running both of these businesses. I would say that if you asked anybody in my family, entrepreneurship is very much a hobby of mine. It's something I enjoy doing. So I've kind of found a way to just marry all three, and it afforded me the ability, after doing it on the side for 8 months in while working full-time, it afforded me the ability to jump ship and take the risk and go out on my own. And some people might not want to take it that far, and I don't blame them. It's risky. You walk away from the steady paycheck and stuff, but at the same time, it's freeing. I don't have a boss. My days are built how I want them to be built, and I got to hire my brother, so that's kind of cool.
Yeah. I mean, as a lot of you might know, I was studying for the LSAT. I previously was a paralegal. That's why I originally moved to New York City. I was going to paralegal and then go to law school. Studied for the LSAT, took the LSAT, and then I was kind of in this down period where, I wasn't applying to schools yet. And then I saw Marcus's business, Minted, blow up, and then there was kind of an opportunity where he needed help. And then after I did it for a few weeks, I was like, this is nice. Like, there's not many people who can say they can work for their brother, and like especially at such an early stage. So that's where I'm at now. I decided I'm not going to law school, at least at the moment. So here we are.
Yeah. There's another important point and it leads me back to people kind of ending up in a job that maybe you don't find enjoyment from. And it's like the idea of living your life based on what others expect of you. And I think that's kind of how a lot of people end up in their first job. It's like, oh, that's the field mom and dad work in, or this is where the kids from my school generally go and work, and I should be doing this, or this is the career field that society deems kind of most important, or kind of the it career right now. And I think that if you find yourself in that situation, sitting down with yourself and breaking out 3 versions of your future self, and they'll probably look generally different. And then under those 3 individuals of your 3 individual future projections of yourself, kind of listing steps of how you could get there. So if you're in a career and you want a career change, well, future self makes the career change. And then the steps underneath that are, well, if I'm changing to a career, say I'm changing from finance to a computer science career, and I'm going to be a software developer, well, I should start working now to learn different programming languages or what I'll need in the future. So just working backwards from where you want to be, and then the steps needed in the intermediary to get to that future self. And then you can kind of marry the three and form a super future self.
Yeah, and I think it's nice to show and like really critically think about all of the steps, because I think a lot of the times, especially me, I do this too. I think everybody does. It's like, God, it'd be great to be this. And you don't really think about all of the steps. And you're like, why don't I just quit my job and become, if it was a software engineer, like I'm so many steps away from that. So it's nice to have a plan in front of you where it's like, okay, I originally thought this was going to be really easy, but this could be like multiple years in order to get there.
Yeah. And I think in your 20s, I don't know what the actual age is for guys especially, but I think the frontal lobe stops developing at like 28 or 26 or something.
I think 25.
So the ability to like forward think like that is something you're going to have to force yourself to do, because the brain isn't just going to intuitively do it unless you're just built like different. I don't know. But yeah, that's kind of life in your 20s, perception versus reality. And then it kind of ties into living in New York City. Sean and I both moved here in our 20s, kind of fresh out of college. And so I guess we have some ideas about living in New York City's, probably some good and bad. I mean, I remember I had been living here for 3 years before Sean moved up here. And I remember talking to him in the beginning, and he was like generally concerned with living in New York City. He thought it was kind of more dangerous than it is. And I mean, you have to be on your toes and you can't be oblivious to things, but I think he thought it was like crime ridden, like dangerous to walk down the street type deal.
Yeah, I mean, the only experience I had with New York City was like movies and, music and pop culture. And for some reason in my head, I just had this total image where, every time I walked outside, something bad was going to happen to me, which I quickly found out that's not the case. New York City is actually very safe. You just have to be aware, and you have to, use common sense.
Also, I think just being able to walk confident, whether you're a man or a woman, like if you have a confident walk and you look like you know where you're going, you're not on your phone, like you might have music in, but it's not too loud that you can't hear what's going on around you. Generally, you'll be okay. But it's tough to obviously say. I know like women do have it a lot worse than men, and
100%.
That's a problem. When did we know we were moving to New York? So for me, I had always wanted to end up here. In college, it was always dead set on I was going to go work on Wall Street. And then right before finals, second semester, senior year of college, I was scouted by Wilhelmina and signed to them as a model, which ultimately brought me to New York City. That's how I arrived here. So it wasn't finance, it was modeling. And then, a few years later, maybe 2 years later, I was back in finance. But yeah, I mean, the idea was implanted very early, freshman year of college, essentially.
Yeah, I think Marcus knew way before me. I honestly had no idea I was going to end up in New York. Like, I kind of wanted to stay in D.C. We're originally from Virginia. I thought maybe I might be interested in politics or something along those lines. I did an internship at the House. So like, and I like DC a lot. Seems very clean, and I worked in DC for a little bit. So honestly, I didn't really know I wanted to come to New York City until I started exploring job options for after college.
Yeah, and I guess it probably won't make much sense. I on a Myers-Briggs test, I'm an INTJ introvert, and lived alone as soon as I moved here in such a big, crazy city. But I felt at home. Like for some reason, every time I saw the city growing up, like it gave me this level of excitement, like almost butterflies in my stomach. if something big is going to happen, or if I'm going to do anything on a larger scale, like this is where it's going to need to be. So I was extremely grateful just to be in the environment. I didn't ever really feel pressure to go out or really put myself out there. A lot of my time was just spent in my apartment working on things, doing things, just anything to get by, essentially. Like this city is extremely expensive and it's extremely fast paced. So there's a transition period of like, you are coming from, I wouldn't call where we grew up a small town, but relative to New York City, small town, and the pace is way different. The mindset's way different. And then you're plopped into New York City and it's like, okay, like these people are, it's different here. Like everybody is after something. So I better match that energy or I'm going to get chewed up.
Yeah. I know it took me a while to really get used to it. Like the first maybe month or so, I just constantly felt run down, and like I just was not used to, I obviously wasn't used to walking everywhere. Like you don't have a car. I wasn't used to just like the fast paced. It felt like everybody was just zooming by me, and I was kind of like spinning in circles trying to figure it all out. But nobody actually cares or is willing to really help you. Well, that's not true. There's people who are willing to help you out, but at times it can feel like they don't care. So it's just an adjustment period that I really had to get used to.
Yeah, I mean, like I had said a couple seconds ago, like the opportunity that this city provides people is endless. And that is what I love most about this city. And every time I see the city, I think about it. But I had talked at the beginning about trying to keep up with other people's lifestyle. I think it's extremely prevalent here and in LA. There's such extreme income disparity between people our age, especially people in their 20s. Like I said, there's people that are subsidized by their parents, have extreme wealth. There's people that have made extreme wealth for themselves in a very young age. And there's people that are just getting by or scrapping together whatever they can. And what I've seen happen to people is, if you don't come from like the upper levels of wealth and you get caught up in a scene of trying to match that image, you end up spending all of your money. And then you're either not saving money, or you're living paycheck to paycheck, or you're like struggling, and it just adds stress. So figuring out, I think, who you are and being confident in your situation, regardless of what that might be, is overall healthier than just getting caught up in the wrong thing. Like I said, land of opportunity. But it goes both ways, both bad and good.
Yeah. I think one of the main reasons is, especially if they come from like a smaller town or from, across the country or across the states.
Or from out of the U.S. in general.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like you come to New York City and like you tell all your friends you're leaving. You're like, I'm going to the big city. Like there's so many opportunities. I'm so excited, blah, blah, blah. And like you don't want to disappoint those people. It's like I have to post about being at this crazy place, or I have to post that this crazy event just happened, or all this stuff, just to prove to those people that that you are making it. And it's just not worth it, because you're trying to fulfill like this idea of what you should be that you aren't yet, rather than just kind of put your head down, work towards it, and just grind it out. And then eventually, when you do make it, people will know. There's no reason to really post all about it.
Yeah. And I mean, yeah, I think it's natural in the age we grew up with social media to be looking at how other people are doing. The quicker you can turn off that side of your brain of like like they always say, comparison is the thief of joy, and it's very much true. Like as soon as you can put your blinders up, put your head down, and just work on yourself nonstop, like shit just starts to fall into place. Like I don't even know how to explain it really, but stuff just ends up happening in the right way most of the time. Not all the time, but you have a higher level or a higher chance of things working out in the way that you are working toward them being.
Yeah, and I think it's a fine line, you know. There is a fine line between, you know, doing all of that and then also just being proud of what you've done. So, you know, you really have to look deep into yourself, and like nobody's going to answer that question for you. Like, are you really proud of it, or are you just doing it to be seen?
Yeah. And on the topic of just New Yorkers or being in New York, and from like a social media aspect, there's a ton of content creators here, and I think one of the reasons that it's a good area. Now, it's a good area to create content because there's always stuff going on. Like, I mean, the locations are recognizable to people across the world, but at the same time, the people of New York City are generally desensitized to a lot of stuff. So you could quite literally be filming in the middle of Times Square and nobody's paying attention to you. So it's like a freeing feeling that you can just pursue what you want without being outwardly judged by the people around you. They might make judgments like in their head as they're passing by, but generally everybody has so much going on or they're thinking about so much that nobody really cares. Nobody cares what you're doing.
Mm-hmm. I think it's good for somebody who's young, and I think for us especially is like we've kind of always been like pretty reserved and like always are very conscious of what people think. And obviously we're respectful and everything like that. But I think at sometimes like we're always trying to think like a little too far ahead, whereas like it's not as big of a deal as we're making it in our head. Just take a video of that building. Like nobody's gonna be like, why? Oh, this kid's taking a video. He's probably a tourist. Like nobody's gonna think that. Like you're just restricting yourself. Like as long as you're not making a scene, as long as you're not disrupting people's lives, it's good to know that like these people don't care. Just go on with your life.
Yeah. New York, when you're working, I think when you're working here in your 20s, I mean, and past your 20s for sure, but New York City has definitely like a strong drinking culture inside of like corporate America, even outside, general partying, but like in corporate America, it's very much like lunches with clients, dinners with clients, taking clients out, like that type of thing. And so it can wear you down very fast if you aren't conscious of maybe the sleep that you're losing, or maybe you're out and you're having too much to drink on weekdays and your work performance is suffering. So I think it's just a good idea to be conscious of it. You don't have to change it, you know, like if you're fine, you're fine. It is what it is. But it's good to be conscious of how it is affecting maybe any part of your life, if it is affecting any part of your life. It's just a big part of life and corporate life here in the city.
Yeah, I just feel like it's so much that like New York City is such a grind fest. Like everybody's working so hard. So it's like that work hard, play hard mentality. It's like, oh, I didn't just, you know, put in all of these hours. Like I deserve to like go have fun, and rightfully so, you do. But yeah, as Marcus said, you know, you just got to be conscious to make sure like if you're sleeping like 2 hours every night, then like eventually that's going to catch up to you.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's probably good enough on life in New York City. I mean, outside of, we kind of touched on it's expensive, but yeah, it's expensive. I think everybody knows that. It's one of the most expensive cities in the world. And my advice whenever people ask like about moving here is I just tell them to be ready to grind. Like like you need money to live, and you need money especially to live in New York City. So understanding budgeting, understanding where your money's going, and finding ways to still be smart and balance the fun factor is very important. Like Uber Eatsing every meal, very stupid decision. You're blowing so much money every single week that you could be saving. In my opinion, learn to cook your meals.
Yeah. And it's all just, I mean, these are all things that like we've learned since we've been here, and like it's one of those things where you're gonna have one week where you Uber Eats too much and you check your bank balance and you're like, I need to stop, and that'll be the wake up call, and hopefully that's the wake up call. If not, then you can get yourself in trouble.
Our last topic of the day is what makes life worth living. I know I said in the beginning, like, we're young, so do we have the best advice? No, probably not. I don't think we're seasoned enough. You need people that are 70, 60, 70, 80 years old who have put in the time, seen a lot more than we have. But it was something that was submitted via one of my polls on Instagram, so I figure I might as well try to talk on it a little bit. But I would, and it goes back to the hobby thing. I think finding what makes you happy is important, and it doesn't have to be something that makes you happy all of the time. Like, I don't know. I love entrepreneurship. I love trying to build things. I have always like kind of done stuff with my hands when I was younger, or like tried to figure out how things work. And I love fashion and I love fitness, and I found a way to marry them and ultimately make money from it. But I would still be doing those things even if I wasn't making money from them, So it was a way for me, especially in an analytical field like finance, like it gave me a creative outlet. So I just was finding a way to explore and express creativity outside of every single day being monotonous in an Excel spreadsheet.
Yeah. And I think it's, besides the big picture things, like, you have like a hobby like that, or your family, or your friendships, and all of those things. It's just kind of finding, like, for me, it's like the small details in life that are often overlooked. Like, for example, just today on a run was rainy and it was miserable, but like I noticed like during it there was like a peacefulness in the air, and like I actually like smiled and was like, this is kind of crazy, but at the same time, like it's very like, this is awesome. Like you look at the skyline, you look at all of this stuff. So like just not getting caught up too much in trying to become, the next Titan, and appreciating every day in these small things. Like for me, that's kind of what I try to focus on.
Yeah. And I guess this second point is more of a personal opinion, or like a personal idea, but I think it is extremely good for people to explore pursuing things that are hard. And I find it a bit easier to see and tangibly feel when it's through physical work, but like things that make you extremely uncomfortable in the process, forcing yourself to grow because of it. And I talk about the physical aspect because it's all tangible stuff you can see. You have to put in a lot of miles, and a lot of miles that hurt, and a lot of speed sessions where you might want to throw up in order to break through to like getting a faster time at a next race. So like there's this huge buildup of weeks of training, getting up and doing it every day. It's uncomfortable. It's not enjoyable 90% of the time. And it's just like, if I actually want to be faster, if I want a faster time during this race, I have to do this. I have to. And on a run like today that Sean just talked about, I was thinking about this, and it's like days like those where you're trying to get through it, and you form new like compartments in your mind where you can store away just being uncomfortable. Like you have 11 miles in the rain. The rain is freezing. It's freezing outside. The wind is blowing. You're cold. How are you going to just compartmentalize that being that uncomfortable for 11 miles and get through it so that you're continuing to move forward in your progress?
Yeah. And I think the best part about it all is like after you do it, you can do it. And so like whenever it happens again, it is going to be easier. Mm-hmm. Like there's no doubt about it. You've done it before. Like it's just building blocks and building blocks and building blocks. And I think like Marcus said, it's hard because it's like it's so many hours of work for a race that could be 2 hours. It could be an hour and a half. And a lot of the times people are like, that's not worth it. But the process is what, makes it worth it. And it's hard, and you see the results, hopefully, if you do it correctly. And that's what you chase.
Yeah. One of the comments that I've gotten a lot on my running videos is like, you're doing all of this for what? Like, you're not even a professional athlete. And it's like, that's not what it's about for me. It's like, how far can I push my body, and how much of it can I explore? Like, how like, where is the end? I don't know what the end is. Like, I used to think like running 5 miles in a sub-7 pace was crazy. I thought I would never be able to do it. I mean, I can do it in sub-6 maybe now. So it's like, how far can the human body go? And when you're exploring how far the human body can go, you're generally exploring your mind, because ultimately, like, your mind's gonna quit probably 10 times earlier than your body does. You can will yourself through a lot of uncomfortable things.
Yeah. And there used to be a huge mental block for me, anything over 6 miles. Like, when I first started running, like, mentally at 6 miles, like, I checked out, even though I know my body probably could have run another however many miles I needed. But, like, overcoming that block was a huge mental battle. And it was like, but at the end of the day, like, I figured out I could do it. I worked through it, and like, it was a whole process, but I learned a lot from it.
Yeah. And I mean, the last part in the whole like life worth living thing is just having a positive impact on the people that come in contact with you. I mean, I get a lot of joy receiving messages from people that say like, hey, you got me into running, or you helped me develop better habits, or even times where I can just like help out where I can, like we got some people flights home for the holidays, or just small things like that. Like, it feels good to be it feels good to try and be a positive impact, or like a force of some form of good. I don't really know how to put it. Like, and it's like not even really something I like talking about, but it's like just trying to be a positive influence.
Yeah. And look, you'll never be like positive 100% of the times, but like, as long as you try to do it the majority of the time, I guarantee you'll feel better. Like, there's nothing, at least to me, like, more satisfying than like small gestures, like somebody who has a kid and has a stroller and you open the door for them, or like an elderly person, helping them, they drop something and you pick it up. Like, you see how much they appreciate it, and it wasn't hard for you to do. And it's just like those moments that not only make, I think the world a better place, but just generally will make you happier.
Yeah, there's times to put yourself second, and yeah, that wraps up this episode. I do have one request. If you are listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, writing a review is huge. I think that's the only way to really help the algorithm. So if you enjoyed the episode, or you've enjoyed any of the episodes, just writing a review would be great for us. If you're on YouTube and you have any ideas about the podcast, just let us know in the comments. That'd be great. Other than that, we'll be back next week. Take care.